You shouldn't bother going to a matchmaking party you're not excited about, especially when it's just to make up the numbers. I knew that, but somehow I ended up attending. That day, it felt like fate played a prank on me with the meeting that awaited. I'm Alex, 28 years old. I have a bit of an unusual job. Even though it's unusual, it's not that I'm bad with people or that I dislike them. I have a fair number of friends, and girlfriends are always around, it seems. I'm less attached than others. I've never had a long-term relationship. Probably there's something wrong with me. I usually don't think too deeply about it, just shrug it off with an "oh well." Again, because of this, I'm often teased by female friends as being cold. That day, I was a bit irritated as work wasn't going as planned. My work clothes were dirtier than usual, a sign that my frustration was out of the ordinary. At that moment, I got a call from an old college friend, Jason. "Alex, can you come to a matchmaking party?" Someone who was supposed to come got sick, and we're short on people, Jason said in his usual light tone. He's been known as a matchmaking party pro since our college days. He's got a wide network and is guaranteed to organize a successful event. Since college, he's been responsible for many marriages through his parties. With my hands dirty, I turned my phone on speaker, sat down on the workbench, and lit a cigarette. This is sudden, as always. It looks like I don't even have time to change. I exhale a thin stream of smoke along with my words, watching the elegant swirl of smoke in the air. I thought it looked beautiful. "The place is near your workshop, just come as you are," he said. The place he mentioned is a slightly upscale French bistro. I visit it often because it's so close. I'm well acquainted with the owner there, so showing up in work clothes is nothing unusual. "No problem at all. I'm in if you pay for it." I heard his clicking tongue through the speaker in response to my reply. "You're not broke, just always looking to take advantage," his reply, half joking as always. Nothing has changed since our college days. He indicated that the matchmaking party would start in 15 minutes. I told him I'd be a bit late and hung up. To shift my mood, I snuffed out my cigarette and an empty beer can and reevaluated the day's work on my workbench. Not satisfied with anything, with a swing of my fist, I violently crushed the day's work. After confirming it had lost its original form, I sighed deeply. Another day wasted. My profession? A sculptor. That's my title. The crushed piece was now just a lump of clay, not a slump, I reassured myself as I left the studio. The matchmaking party would be a nice change of pace. I was fed up with myself, wishing somewhere in the depths of my heart that it was. Or so I wondered. If I should at least change my clothes, even if it was just to make up the numbers, I decided to head to the restaurant where the party was to be held in my work clothes. Jason mentioned that he had gathered mostly secretaries for the event. I was curious to see how they'd react to my attire. When I arrived, everyone was already there, and Jason informed me they had just finished toasting. The other male attendees were in suits, fresh from work. Some even wore lawyer badges. Apparently, he had gathered a well-paid crowd today. "Sorry I'm late." I briefly apologized and took a seat in an empty seat. From behind the open kitchen counter, the chef, who owned this restaurant, saw me and slightly raised his hand to greet me. I nodded back slyly. "This is my college friend Alex. He's also 28, same as me." Jason introduced me to the women attending. That was the first time I saw the attending women, and to say the least, they were impressive. Their makeup and nails were immaculately done. Their slender, pale fingers looked as if they'd never touched a household chore. A tilt of their heads released a soft, floral fragrance. All of them were equally beautiful and charming, speaking in high, gentle voices. The woman sitting diagonally across from me was particularly striking. I sipped the beer that had been brought to me as I thought about the fact that such a beautiful woman would also attend a matchmaking party. For a while, I didn't join in on the conversation, focusing instead on quenching my dry throat. During this time, I noticed something. The exceptionally beautiful woman sitting diagonally across was intentionally avoiding looking at me. She was clearly ignoring me. Apparently, she had no interest in a guy in dirty work clothes. To say she was uninterested would be an understatement. It seemed more like she harbored a slight disgust towards me. "Alex, you don't have a girlfriend right now, do you?" Caught off guard, I responded with a dull nope. That's when the beautiful woman finally looked my way. A little too much makeup, but still beautiful, as I recalled. Her name was Jessica. Surprising if you've ever had a girlfriend. She suddenly turned her attention to me, her eyes looking at me almost as if I were a stray dog. "Well, I've had a girlfriend now and then," I replied nonchalantly, facing her overt hostility. Despite the tense atmosphere between Jessica and me, the guy sitting next to her seemed completely unaware. He was engrossed in conversation with the woman sitting in front of him. It appeared that Jessica was displeased with his lack of attention, resulting in her bad mood. In short, it was her taking it out on me. "Look around you. Don't you see how out of place you are?" She smirked in a mocking way. It seemed her comment was directed at the fact that I was sitting here in my work clothes. I wasn't told there was a dress code. You know what common sense tells you. You're coming to a party with us. It's rude. Her voice grew louder. The other members started to notice our quarrel. "Oh, wait, Jessica. I asked Alex to come over on short notice, and the reason we're wearing suits is because this is our work attire. Alex is just dressed for work as well." Jason tried to mediate between us, half jokingly. Still, she didn't stop belittling me. "You know what? Let me be the first to clarify something. You all are too kind to say." She said this as she looked around at the other women. It seemed she positioned herself as the queen bee among the group. Everyone avoided eye contact with Jessica. "Why don't you go home, you poor guy?" In a mocking tone, Jessica snapped at me. That comment finally got to me. No sooner had I opened my mouth to say something back than I heard a clunk and the pull of a chair. "Then I will be leaving," a woman stood up and said. So she was the woman the man had been eagerly hitting on while ignoring Jessica. She was a bit mysterious, with a subtle, low tone that suited her well. "Would I let you participate out of kindness, and this is the attitude I get. Who do you think you are?" Her anger redirected toward her, but Jessica's anger didn't seem to matter to her. "I am here by order of you, in other words, my boss. If I am allowed to leave, I would like to do so immediately." Her voice was low and calm. "Oh no, Sophie, please don't tell me you're leaving when you rarely even join us for drinks." Jason raised his voice, trying to stop her from leaving. It appeared that he was also interested in her. "Jason, it was a brief but very pleasant time for me, but I hope you understand that any more of this time means nothing to me and my service overtime has come to an end." Without a hint of the smile, she addressed Jason and placed a few $100 bills on the table and walked out. It all happened in a flash. Overwhelmed by her demeanor, I just gaped, watching her walk away. What's with that attitude? "I'll tell my mom about this when I get home." Jessica grumbled in frustration and downed her glass of wine in one go. It seemed that they had connections beyond just work. "Who was that woman? You called her Sophie, right?" I quietly asked Jason. Her name was Sophie. It turned out she was actually Jessica's secretary. Jessica was her boss. After that, Jessica's mood quickly improved as she was able to talk leisurely with a man she favored because Sophie was no longer there. The man seemed displeased, but she was oblivious. I finished 2 beers and made up an excuse to leave the matchmaking party early. I had no interest in what happened after I left. The only person I was interested in at the party was Sophie, who had left promptly. We hadn't exchanged a single word, and I didn't know her contact details. Probably I'll never see her again. A week has passed since the matchmaking party. Nothing in my daily life has changed. Jason contacted me to apologize afterwards. It seems that the matchmaking party was arranged at Jessica's request, probably because the man she was interested in was going to be there. He asked me to join again, but I felt like avoiding it for a while. Some things seemed tedious, and most importantly, the work was overwhelming. On the workbench, the smashed clay was still there after a week. I just couldn't bring myself to redo it, so I opened my computer to check my emails. I accepted job requests via email, whether sculpting prototypes or crafting final pieces. I only took on work that I genuinely liked, since I was not affiliated with any company. I believed I was entitled to this bit of self-indulgence. But the job that was stuck in front of me at the time was not one I was willing to accept. It was a job referred to by my mentor, which I couldn't refuse. I thought it was understandable that I didn't feel good about it. The task involved researching to create a statue of a particular individual. That was the job currently causing me distress. Moreover, all they gave me was one photo, and the photo was like a passport photo. It was impossible to grasp his personality from such a photo. A bust might be manageable, but a full-body statue would have been difficult. No choice but to go and see for myself. I muttered to myself, trying to muster some motivation. I threw on a coat over my work clothes and headed out. My destination was a private museum, owned by an entrepreneur who had collected various artworks. The statue of Charles Harrison, the founder of this museum, was my job. To understand his personality, I visited the museum he founded. The museum was located deep within a forest that was artificially constructed. The museum, with its white walls and large windows, was striking. During a weekday afternoon, the place was quiet, with few visitors. The exhibits, divided between paintings and sculptures, were breathtakingly serene and beautiful. His taste in art clearly was refined. I had heard he was a demanding person, but I felt that shouldn't be the sole focus of the statue. It was against my principles to create something that only cut out a part of a multifaceted human being. I wanted to know more desperately. I examined the exhibits, searching for fragments of his essence. "Oh my gosh, look who's here. I recognized you right away by your dirty work clothes." A voice from behind startled me, and I turned around. There stood Jessica, arms crossed, dressed in a suit. "I didn't know you had a taste for fine art." "Excuse me, this is my workplace." She pointed at a security camera that was monitoring the museum. Apparently, she had seen me on the monitor. I really wished she would just leave me alone. "So, this is your workplace?" "Yes, I'm the deputy director here. Would you like a tour?" "No, thank you. I prefer to look around quietly." I turned my back to her, focusing on the artworks behind me. She clicked her heels in irritation. "Jessica, the chief curator Fred is waiting for your approval." That low and calm voice reached my ears. I instinctively turned around. There stood Sophie. She was wearing a long tight skirt suit and a thin silver necklace. Her modest makeup was the same as at the matchmaking party. "Alex, I apologize for not properly introducing myself the other day," she said. "Sophie?" I asked in surprise. "Yes, and I'm sorry for the interruption," she continued. "But what's this guy to you, Jessica?" Suddenly, Jessica started to panic at Sophie's demeanor. "Jessica, this is Alex, the sculptor we've commissioned for the museum statue." Sophie spoke calmly yet sternly, reprimanding Jessica with her gaze. Jessica exclaimed in surprise. I felt a bit embarrassed being introduced so formally. In reality, he's not the kind of person who would normally accept such a sudden request from our museum. "Please show him the proper respect as a representative of our institution," Sophie continued. Jessica's face visibly turned red. She probably felt humiliated. "Oh, thanks, but I'm not that type of person." I couldn't refuse a job from my mentor. I tried to respond cheerfully. However, unable to bear the embarrassment, Jessica glared at Sophie, then turned on her heel and fled from the exhibition room. "She's still so childish, it's troubling." Sophie sighed softly as she watched Jessica leave. You mentioned you were her secretary, right? Yes, I work here as a secretary for both the director Miranda and the deputy director Jessica. She then handed me her business card. She began to explain the reason she had commissioned the statue from me. Sophie mentioned that she had been deeply impressed by my solo exhibition. I was captivated by your solo exhibition at the gallery 2 years ago. I really wanted you to create the statue of Charles Harrison, our founder, she said. I was somewhat embarrassed by her passionate words, which were different from those at the matchmaking party. She had heard from my mentor about the progress of the statue and guessed that I would show up at the museum soon. Alex, I anticipated that you would want to learn more about Charles. Her prediction was spot on. I was a little frustrated and embarrassed knowing that she had read my actions. Please, let me introduce you to more about Charles. She smiled warmly at me. Who could resist such a smile? I sincerely responded, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. I had assumed she would guide me inside the museum, but instead, she quickly led me outside. She then took me straight to the museum's backyard. This was his favorite spot, she explained. It was a small space surrounded by quiet groves. Only one modest bench was placed. I became certain that he was a person who loved tranquility in nature, she explained. She told me that he always reads here. People at the top are lonely. He was no exception, she continued. The one who kept him company was... She gently handed me a photograph. At Charles's feet, a large dog lay. This dog had wandered into the forest as a stray. Sophie told me that raising a stray dog born into the wild was more difficult than we could have imagined. Always skittish, the dog could hardly walk straight even on a leash. It was Charles who had gently embraced and comforted the stray's fearful heart. He wasn't just a strict and ruthless businessman. I looked down at the photo again. Both the dog at his feet and Charles himself had calm expressions. This is a very peaceful place. I shared my genuine impression, and she nodded happily. Miranda and Jessica probably want a grand and stern statue of Charles, but I don't think such a statue fits this museum. She reiterated why she had chosen me for this task. I decided to meet Sophie's expectations. As she stared straight at me, I braced myself. Something clicked in my mind. Thank you. I feel like I've had a breakthrough. I needed to get back to my studio before the image in my mind faded. Sensing my urgency, she nodded appreciatively, sending me off. I left in a rush, barely managing a proper goodbye to Sophie, and hurried back to my studio. Since visiting the museum, I've been working nearly non-stop on the sculpture. Strict yet cold, kind yet solitary, Charles was a man of complex character. I focused intently on capturing the true essence of the elusive Charles. Again and again, I layered and smashed the clay, constantly experimenting. The finished miniature sculpture was incredible, even for me. I was sure Sophie would like it. She was the first person I wanted to show it to. I felt a surge of excitement welling up inside me when I notified the museum that the prototype was complete. A clerk told me that Miranda and Jessica wanted to see it. They will be visiting my studio this afternoon. If they were coming, then Sophie, who is their secretary, would probably accompany them. Imagining her delighted face made me excited. This feeling was new to me. It was like waiting for a first love. The afternoon came, and a sleek black car pulled up in front of my studio. Jessica was the first to step out, then a woman who looked much like her followed. It was likely her mother, Miranda. I learned later that Jessica was Charles' granddaughter, and Miranda was the wife of his eldest son. Their significant roles at the museum made sense. Thank you so much for visiting my studio. As I opened the door, Miranda and Jessica, followed by Sophie, who nodded slightly behind them, entered. So, it's finished. Jessica's haughty demeanor was unchanged. Miranda, who seemed just as brazen, unabashedly scrutinized me. I've been looking forward to this. As I led them into the studio, Miranda spoke. Charles was her father-in-law, Miranda said. He was a very strict man. Her tone was somewhat bitter, which took me by surprise. My grandfather was a strict and cold businessman. I've never seen him smile. Jessica seemed to agree with her mother. Apparently, Jessica's father had passed away. Miranda and Jessica continued to speak ill of Charles, their father-in-law and grandfather respectively. Their attitude made it clear they held no respect for him. They seemed to have completely forgotten that their current lifestyle was thanks to him while they gossiped. Sophie remains silent, lips tightly sealed. At the studio, I unveiled a prototype of the statue by removing the white cloth that had covered it, eager to see their reactions. My heart was beating a bit faster, curious about what they would say. After a brief silence, Jessica spoke up. "What the heck is this? This isn't right. I've never seen him look like this. Don't make things up." My sculpture of Charles was sitting comfortably in his chair with a gentle smile on his face. The book he was reading lay face down on his lap, and his dog looked up at Charles with trusting eyes at his feet. Far from the stern and ruthless businessman image, I wanted to see Sophie's reaction turning towards her. I saw that she was quietly shedding tears. Miranda and Jessica, busy arguing loudly, hadn't noticed Sophie crying. Without raising her voice, Sophie simply cried quietly. "This is wrong. This isn't my grandfather. This isn't the grandfather I knew. Redo it." Jessica raised her hand, about to smash the clay model. Sophie restrained her hand from behind. "Let go of me," Jessica yelled. "I know this side of Charles. I can't believe that you guys, who are supposed to be part of the same family, don't know it." Her words made Jessica's cheek flush with anger. Her blood must have rushed to her head in fury. "What do you know? A gentle person, that's a joke. Do you have any idea what my mother and I went through?" Shaking off the hand that held her, Jessica screamed at Sophie with a demonic expression. "That's because you guys were secretly trying to sell off the artworks." Sophie's words made the color drain from Jessica's face. "You think me and Grandpa didn't know that?" "My father, who was the second son, told me that I should take his side," Sophie revealed. She was the daughter of Charles's second son. It appeared that Sophie and Jessica were cousins. Following the death of his eldest son, Charles began showing signs of dementia. It was then that Jessica and Miranda saw their opportunity. Without drawing attention, they schemed to sell the artworks Charles had collected. And indeed, some were sold. "My grandfather used to say, 'Why were you in such a hurry when they would inherit everything once he was gone?'" Sophie continued. "He was saddened that you didn't cherish his beloved artwork. It may be a difference in the way we value things, but there are a certain number of people who can only judge artworks by money. I didn't want to blame Jessica and her mother, but I wouldn't want my work judged by such values. Can't you see that the reason you didn't get to touch Grandpa's kind side was because of yourself?" Her words caused Jessica to visibly slump. In a small voice, she repeated, "It's not my fault. I'm not to blame. It's because Grandpa favored you. I just wanted to teach him a lesson," she exclaimed. Selling off precious things as a way of taking revenge. Was this Jessica's form of retaliation? "It's enough, Jessica," the museum director, her mother, said as she gently embraced Jessica, who was trembling with anger. "We would like you to continue with the statue as it is," she said, taking Jessica and leaving the studio. There must have been some conflict between Jessica and Charles. "I never imagined it could have twisted this far," Alex said. "Thank you. I never imagined Grandfather could be revived in such a wonderful way." Sophie expressed her gratitude. "You wanted Jessica to know the side of him, didn't you?" I asked, noticing her surprise. Sophie relaxed, chuckled, and whispered, "You caught me." Sophie then explained that unlike her, Jessica had been raised strictly as the eldest daughter of a legitimate family. Probably, Jessica had misunderstood Charles's affection. If this statue was placed in front of the museum, Jessica will have to face the gentle Charles every day. "I hope that the twisted image of him in her mind will be replaced by this kinder version," Sophie said. She extended her hand for a handshake, and I gladly accepted. I think your cousin will be okay now. But more importantly, why don't we talk about our plans going forward? Sophie looked up, surprised. Her eyes were on me. I could see the reflection of me laughing in her big eyes. Like, how about going out to dinner with me this weekend? Her eyes widened even more. It was as if she was as startled as a deer in headlights. I wished she would say yes right away. I looked into her eyes and prayed in my heart.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.